Hi everyone, some gamer dude here. I've been thinking about starter decks a lot recently, for future planning. There has been quite a few different configurations across different games over the years, and there is definitely a wrong way to do it. I'm not sure there is a right way. You have to find the right configuration that suits your needs and budget, while also being good for attracting consumers. I think by looking at all the options that have been created before our time, we can find something that stands out for your project. Let's start by asking ourselves, what is a starter deck trying to achieve? What is the goal? It is an easily accessed entry into the game. It has to cover the basics and be easily understood. It should be affordable to make entry into the game as appealing as possible. What you don't want is to have major thought needed for the purchase due to the cost, or the starting experience to contain hard-to-grasp concepts. You'll drive people away with both of these. I don't believe it should be competitive. That's not what a starter deck should be doing. That's more in line with what Konami calls a structure deck. But it should provide a positive experience with your game. It should show the consumer what's fun about it. It should also form a good springboard into your game, something to build from. With this in mind, let's move to the first starter decks. Back in 1993, when Magic the Gathering started, it launched with randomized starter decks. These 60-card decks were more of a precursor to the land pack, being the most easily accessible form of bulk lands at the time. The actual deck contained roughly the equivalent of 2 packs on top of the lands. I'm not sure how prevalent this was back in the day, but this randomized starter deck practice continued into the early 2000s with new games. Though I can think of one game that did this in the mid-2010s. In some ways, this kind of suits games like Magic. You can get the lands out there, the rares make it feel like it's a couple of boosters with more to justify the price. You don't have to make multiple products. But it's a very bad fit for most games, including Magic. You can't curate that first experience people have. While products of this type typically have a brick of cards you get regardless, your consumer's first experience is essentially a sealed event. That doesn't have the ability to send the right messages. You can't really create a deck that's fun, shows all the basics, and keeps things at an easily understood level. You just throw them a call, a bunch of cards on top of that, and hope for the best. This is even worse with avatar-based games, where the character people play as is important. They have or will develop an emotional attachment to the character. If they get someone they don't want or doesn't appeal to them, they'll feel frustrated, or worse yet, ripped off. They will not want to continue with the game. You are presuming they'll keep consuming or buy enough to get a good spread. Only people really into your game or IP would partake in such a practice. That's far from everyone. Next we have the related but exceedingly rare practice of putting your game out with just one starter deck. Dragon Ball Super did this, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Has done this since the GX era. Coming out with just one deck has its good points and its bad points. You get the ability to curate that ideal starter experience, teach people the game, show them its better aspects, ease them into it. You only have one item to produce. You don't have to worry about balancing as much, since the starter experience involves the one deck fighting itself. I think this one really depends on what your product is. For Yu-Gi-Oh!, as it started moving away from the manga and started being about the cards or the new protagonist of the anime designed to sell cards, it fit. Showing off Yugi's cards from the manga wasn't the priority anymore. The starter deck now focused on teaching people how to play the game. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has some quirks that make it different from other games. It hasn't got colours or colour identities, so one deck suffices. You can show people everything with one product. Things like archetypes can be held back from new players. It's not necessary on an entry level. Dragon Ball Super used a highly popular main character with a marketable new form from a beloved IP to sell the game. It too was just fine with a Goku deck. If you have a brand new IP or are more of a cast ensemble, I wouldn't take this path. You really run the risk of your choices not having wide enough appeal. I feel that you'd have to be really confident in your IP or character selection for this to work out of the gate. Down this path of the evolutionary tree, we have the wave of starters. This generally ranges from 2 decks up to 5. This form of introductory product has all the benefits of the prior form. You can curate that entry-level experience, though there is considerably more work behind the scenes to get it to be a balanced, fun experience. Most fail. You can keep the decks entry-level, show off the game's mechanics, what makes it fun, all that good stuff. You also give the consumer choice. They can now pick a theme or character that suits their tastes. You have a better chance of catching people's eye and making a consumer out of them with this option. The problem comes from the back end, especially if you're new. The cost and risk. This is more to do with games that put out each deck as its own SKU and ship them as a solid case, not 2 assortments in the one SKU like Pokemon. You put out 3 to 5 decks. Everyone gets their own deck to suit their taste. Every single one of those SKUs needs its own print run. Depending on your size, that might be unfeasible. It's too expensive. Art, development, production, it all adds up. Even if you reuse a lot of assets, the cost is still there. This is your risk, but what about the stores? Some themes or characters will undoubtedly be a harder sell than others. Stores will get stuck with the stock, or if you're doing it yourself, you will. Now you've got a cost sink that's hard to move and has potentially damaged your business relationship with the stores. Oh, except it gets worse. If these decks end up on clearance, not only is the store losing money and will consequently see your game as a liability, your game looks to be of less value to the consumer. It had to have ended up on clearance for a reason, right? Was it dead on arrival? Is it dying? This lowers the value of the brand as a whole. You don't want that. Waves of starters can work, but there are generally other factors to consider. So let's get back to the root of the starter deck tree, the randomized starter deck. The other evolutionary path is the 2-player starter kit. This is usually just 2 half decks used for teaching that can be merged into one starter deck. Not all games can use the 2-player starter kit. They might have a system where decks need to be a certain size and you can't break them up into 2 half decks. But generally a lot of games can. I don't see this one used very much anymore. It's mostly been regulated to demo decks, and I'm not entirely sure why. It does everything you need it to do. Be that entry-level product that's easy to pick up and play with a low cost. It's even better than other options because a person can buy one product and use that to teach their friends, exposing more people to the game without having to invest in 2 products. From there, you can literally get people on board at no cost to themselves. Be exactly like a phone game. While I think this needs to make a comeback, it's a very good product type. I suspect the reason why it went away has much more to do with the focus on cards as life systems, shields and damage zones in particular, along with more cards going to the hand a turn. While Duel Masters might be able to play with a hand, shield zone, and 10-card deck, or Pokemon able to be played with a 30-card deck using 3 prizes, neither of these games are drawing 2 cards a turn, using drive checks, or anything of the like. You don't run through your deck particularly quickly. Pokemon actually has seemed to have abandoned this product type in Sun and Moon, which is a shame. I think they're actually better for their intended purpose than the conventional starter decks, as people can share them. There might be some marketability issues I'm not seeing, but I think the 2-player starter kit is a fantastic concept that more games should be aiming for. From the 2-player starter kit, we have 2 different branches, starting with the Duel Deck set. The Duel Deck is a product comprised of 2 full decks that are intended to be used against each other. Typically this is used as a structure deck type product, but I think it can suit the starter deck framework too. You can keep it entry level, it has 2 themes, hopefully one of them appeals. Consumers can share this with their friends like the starter kits, giving your game more exposure. Being full decks, it doesn't suffer from the issues of the starter kits. It doesn't matter if your game draws a lot of cards or uses them as damage, they're full decks. The issue with the dual deck is the cost attached. It's likely going to be around double the price of one starter deck. That's a harder sell, especially as a brand new game. You could price it lower in an attempt to get more sales, but that might reflect on the product in a way you don't want. Do you want to be known as the budget game? It's fine if you do, but if you don't, you might not want to go this route. Furthermore, can you afford this? Can you afford to make a larger, heavier product and charge the same amount as a smaller, lighter product? Are you willing to take that hit? These are serious decisions you're going to have to make. Lower profits and appearing as a budget product versus charging more and potentially alienating people. The second evolutionary branch I've only seen from Force of Will over two different configurations is a variant of the two-player starter kit. When the two decks are merged, you'll have your choice of two different avatar cards. This was first done with the Italian Grim Era starters, the only region to get starters in Grim Era, but returned with New Valhalla, where they merged this idea with the wave of starters. Obviously, this can only be achieved with avatar-type cards, but it's a nice mix of concepts. It does everything we wanted to do as an entry-level product. It takes the better ideas of the two-player starter kit, one product servicing two players at a lower price. It gives options to the consumer, like the wave of starter decks or the dual decks, a choice of themes to broaden the appeal of your product. Being two half decks, it's economic to produce, and the end product doesn't look like a budget product. Obviously, the issue is that not every game can facilitate this. It might not have the right gameplay to do it, but it's a brilliant concept that should be explored if you can. You can hit most every mark with one product. Ultimately, it's up to you to find the right starter deck for your game. A Venn diagram of what does your game need and what can you afford to produce. Different games have different needs and different circumstances. I think as players we don't really think about things like starter decks that much. We just accept them for what they are, then dismiss them as not for us. But the reality is that they are a very important product. If you want the game to expand, this is the product best suited to do that, and the single most important product. Maybe you have given it some thought and have some preferences in execution. You like one type over another. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on the matter, so leave your comments down below. Till next time, this has been Some Gamer Dude, and thanks for watching.